Welcome to Power of Attorney. I'm Kim Mutcherson. I am the Dean of Rutgers Law School on the Camden campus, and I'm excited today to be here with two of our alums to talk about their RLAW journey. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell us both your name and when you graduated from Rutgers.
Good morning, Dean. Thank you for having us. My name is John Shindle. I'm a graduate of the class of 2013.
And I'm Brian Hall, and I graduated in 2012.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back to both of you. It's exciting to have you here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So I like to start out kind of with what I've been sort of calling an origin story, right? So how is it that you decided that you wanted to be a lawyer? Of all the things you could have chosen to do with your life, why law school and why being a lawyer?
For me, it started at a young age. I was very interested in politics, and every politician happened to be a lawyer at that point. Fell away from it a little bit after college, worked abroad, and then decided to take the LSAT, see how I did. And when I came back to the States, it seemed like a good time to try out law school.
Great.
I took a very roundabout way to law school. I actually never intended to be a lawyer growing up or anything. I was in the Army for 5 years. I finished my undergrad while I was in, and then when I got out, it was 2008. And the job market was terrible at the time. And I had the GI Bill. So I said, well, I'll just go back to grad school, and hopefully the economy will turn around after I graduate. So I actually went to the MBA program. I met another student named Chris who was doing the joint program. I was like, what's this joint program you're doing? He's like, you can get both degrees in almost the same amount of time. I was like, all right, well, I'll check that out. And I did a semester in the MBA program before I even applied to law school. And then I got in, and the rest is history.
I love the accidental lawyer stories.
I mean, it really was.
So why Rutgers, though?
So I went to Rutgers undergrad, and I was here for a couple of years before I joined the Army. So when I got out, I was married at the time. My wife and I are both from South Jersey. I grew up in Gloucester County. So I came home, and we wanted to stay here and start a family and everything. So it just made sense to come back to Rutgers.
And then for me, I made the mistake of spending too much on undergrad, and then got into a few other schools in the area. And again, with the in-state tuition, good reputation, and an easier commute, it made the most sense. And looking back, I'm very glad I did it.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is so critical about who we are is that we're a public institution and that we tend to be much more affordable than other law schools are. And in this day and age, that's definitely something that people should be thinking about. So you're not the only person who has that story. Let's talk about law school a little bit. Was it everything you hoped and dreamed it would be?
I mean, I didn't have any expectations other than I knew that the first year of law school was supposed to be this torturous ordeal. And I personally just treated it like a full-time job. I mean, I was married at the time. My twin boys were born during my first semester of law school. I think I went back to the MBA program at night the following semester. If you treat it like a full-time job, studying, going to class, just being on campus, really kind of just dedicating yourself to it, I thought it was more than doable. I mean, the first year was intense, but I felt like afterwards, when you could take more practical skills classes and kind of take the classes that in the areas of law that you were interested in, became, I mean, not that the first year was like completely unenjoyable, but the last 2 years were more enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously we have a part-time program, so we have evening students, but, we get a nice contingent of people who, I call them our adults, right? So our folks who've been out in the world a little bit, who've had a little more life experience, and I feel like it really adds something significant to your law school experience. And I wonder if you could just talk about that a little bit, how coming back to school sort of affects how you relate to being a law student.
Because I had done other things, in between undergrad and being in the Army, and it really just boiled down to I took it very serious, and a lot of it was I was married and I had young kids, so I didn't do much outside of school. Like, unfortunately, I didn't get to hang out and socialize a whole lot, or maybe it was fortunately I didn't. I just kind of buckled down and did school. I don't know if anybody really goes to law school and tries to only halfway do it. I don't know. I mean, once I made the decision that this is what I was going to do, I knew that I needed to do well. And for me, having been in the Army, and I was a linguist, so I had to learn a whole new language at the language school. I found out I wasn't gifted in linguistics. I didn't have like a knack for it, so I had to just study like all the time and work hard. So I kind of knew that, I'm not like a natural scholar or anything. I knew I was just going to have to work hard at it. So that's really just what I did. So I guess I just had that experience from being in the Army and learning a new language and whatnot. So I just approached it in the same way.
Yeah. And I think there's something really powerful and useful about people hearing the message that you don't have to have some sort of innate specialness to you in order to be able to come to law school.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I had a bit of the imposter complex. Like I always felt like, oh man, should I even be here, kind of thing. But yeah, if you work hard, do what your professors ask of you, you can do it. Yeah.
Right. It's definitely not impossible.
Right.
Certainly not. And similar thoughts on going out into the workforce between undergrad and graduate. You just have to take into account like a 40 to 50 hour work week normally is what you're dealing with. And then I always give kudos to those people who work full time and do the part-time program or go to night school. It's an amazing accomplishment.
extraordinary,
I did part-time work with the Domestic Violence Project and also some internships with professors here. Fortunately, some of the scholarships were available during the summer and the like, so I was able to take advantage. But I always saw a difference between those people who went straight to undergrad into law school versus people who worked a couple years or had families or were married. They just didn't have as much extra time to socialize, and they had to kind of prioritize school first, work first, and then family. And I do think it adds something to the school when you have people who've had that work experience and then go and get their degree.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you certainly feel it as a professor, particularly when we teach night students. It's like nobody's got time to waste, right? We're there. We've got the few hours that we're in the classroom together, and we should get things done. I want to go back to talk about the Domestic Violence Project a little bit because, one of the things that I really love about what we do is that we do create these opportunities for students to, no matter where they're going to go out into the world and what kind of work they're going to do while they're in law school, they can have these really rich experiences. So can you tell folks what the DV Project is and then what kind of work you were doing?
Sure. So the Domestic Violence Project is a nonprofit run through the school where you're helping domestic violence victims in Camden County, oftentimes at the courthouse down the street. I started volunteering my 1L year, did training with people I'm still very close with now and actually referred clients to. So built some good bonds with that. And then I had the good fortune of applying and getting offered one of the jobs as a student director over the summer. I worked with two terrific people, a few professors who are no longer here, but were wonderful to work with. And I do think those opportunities, whether it be an internship, externship, any experience where you're building on what you're hearing in the classroom and seeing it out in the real world, I think that's the biggest value, particularly that Rutgers brings. A lot of the other schools have some of those programs, but I don't believe as many. And as a parent, the differences in certain types of law that you're going to see out on the main line versus here in the city.
Absolutely, absolutely. I did a clinic when I was in law school, and I still just think of it as one of the most formative experiences that I had, not just as a law student, but as a person and as a lawyer, and just some of the folks who I met through that experience, their stories still really resonate with me. So let's talk a little bit about, we'll talk a little bit about inside the classroom, and then we'll talk about, again, some of the experiences that folks are able to have outside of the classroom. So I think that there is often this vision of law school classrooms as these very sort of stodgy and scary places where you have a professor in the front who's just like dying to humiliate everybody in the classroom. I would hope that that was not your experience. If it was, we'll just edit it out. But I would love to hear you talk a little bit about what it was like, sort of the day-to-day experience of being a student in a Rutgers law classroom.
I did have a couple instances where I was asked a question about a case that I didn't think we had to know about for a week.
Oh, geez.
And that's fine because it's not everything that happens in the class, but it is a little realistic. Sometimes you'll have a judge ask you a question that may not be relevant, but because the judge is asking it, it is relevant.
Right.
And I do think that's an important part, but again, it's certainly not the entirety of every class. There is feedback, there is opportunities to talk with a professor before and after class. I remember everyone being readily available in preparation for exams. So I think it's a good mix of not just the very old way where everyone is beating up on you, and also an opportunity to get some real feedback and maybe even express some of your opinions on what the law may mean, as opposed to just what a certain professor thinks it is.
Right.
I remember most of those, the mandatory classes, that you take, property and contracts and civ pro and all that, were more formal, I guess.
Yeah.
And there weren't many professors that would put you on the spot like regularly. I don't ever remember being like humiliated or anything. I mean, well, I'm sure I didn't ever say anything stupid during class.
Certainly not.
But I don't remember ever being like grilled or humiliated or anything. It was always a good experience. And again, you should know what you're supposed to be prepared for. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was usually in good humor too. Like if somebody didn't know something or maybe their answer was a little off, or or a fellow student would help you out maybe.
What are some of the best classes or best professors that you remember from your time here?
My hands down best experience was the clinic program. Mm-hmm. I did the Child and Family Advocacy Clinic with Professor Lohr, who was probably one of my favorite professors as well. Like John was saying, like, your ability to go out into the community and actually help people and put what we're learning in school to practice was phenomenal. And,
Can you tell folks who don't know about the clinic what kind of work you were doing?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's in your third year of law school, you're eligible to take a clinic as a class where you're assigned a professor to kind of oversee real cases that you handle. So in child and family advocacy, we handled juvenile delinquency cases. So we handled, I handled 2 that year with my partner. One, somebody got charged with, he did something in school. He got into a fight at school. He threw something at a kid in school and got charged with aggravated assault for throwing something at a kid. And we ended up representing him, and I think he pled to some lower charge. And then the second one we got, the client was charged with absconding from parole. And for him, that was a big deal because he had other charges, like he had a history, and he was being held in juvenile detention the whole time we were representing him. Like we literally went to, I think we drove to like Trenton and met with him one time, and then we drove to, I think he was somewhere in Burlington County being held. But the bottom line was they were charging him with absconding, which basically means he was hiding from his parole officer.
Right.
To the prosecutor, we said, no, he just didn't check in. Yeah, he violated his parole. He didn't abscond.
Right.
I don't know if it's because we were law students. She didn't want to budge. Mm-hmm. So we had to try the thing. He said, look, I didn't abscond. I didn't hide. And we know that because they found him exactly where they knew he would be, like in where he hangs out with family members. So if he was hiding, he's a really bad hider, which is what we said. And I'll never forget it and this is one of the reasons that I don't do criminal law, because we went to court and J.C. Lohr he had us ready. He's like, you're going to have to try this thing. And we had to cross-examine witnesses, and we did direct examination of witnesses. My partner and I split it up. We practiced a closing. It went really well. Like, everybody testified, like, yeah, he wasn't hiding. Like, we all knew where he was at. If you would have just asked us, we'd have been like, yeah, he's with his sister. And I found him in the transportation center here in Camden, which is like, everybody knew that's how he got from, mom's house to Camden, all that. And we basically said to the judge, if you're playing hide and seek, you don't go and hide in the place everybody knows you're going to be.
Right.
And then the judge gives this long colloquy on the record and basically says that he's finding him guilty. And I'm sitting there, I'm like looking around, I'm looking at JC, I'm like, you believe in it? Like, what is going on here? This kid, like, because he was facing like 2 years. I was like, oh my God, if this kid goes away for 2 years, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then the judge said at the end, he said, so I'm finding him guilty. However, I think that the juvenile justice system has expended as much resources as are necessary. So I'm going to let him go on probation. So I'm finding him guilty, but I'm going to let him go on probation. So basically, I think he agreed with us, but he just wanted to keep him on a little bit of a leash. Mm-hmm. So he walked out of the courtroom that day, and we drove him home and dropped him off at his mom's house.
Right.
And it was super cool. I mean, it went from being like, it was a wreck to being like, it was like the best day of law school. And that was literally, I did the clinic in my last semester of law school, and I think law school had actually finished. We did that like a week after the semester had ended. So it was like the last thing I did. It was a great memory. I'll never forget it. But that's why I don't do criminal law. Like, I couldn't handle it.
The consequences, sure.
Just the thought of, but I couldn't imagine doing that regularly. So I think the question was my favorite class and favorite professor. I recommend to everybody to do some sort of clinic. There's all kinds of different clinics.
Yep.
Bankruptcy clinic, civil practice clinic. Do one of them, because you'll actually get to, you'll go into a courtroom
I had to do it a few times
so-
at the civil practice clinic. My favorite class and professor was evidence, though, after my first year. I took it over the summer. And that was in part because Victoria Chase was also helping out with the domestic violence project, and she hired me for the job. So.
Right.
But I'm still saying it years later. But yeah, I would hit on the clinics if you get a chance to do one. I got to go in front of a judge who actually interviewed me for a clerkship after the case was over.
Look at that.
Came in
And
second.
you said you did civil practice.
Civil practice clinic, yes. And then
Which is basically our it's the hodgepodge, right? I mean, so it really allows you to potentially touch on a lot of different, not criminal practice, obviously, but different types of civil practice.
So yes, it ended up being a bit of a mix. We got to do some estate planning for individuals. We did end up with a DV case both in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, along with a divorce and a foreclosure, all combined into one. So like you said, a
Wow.
hodgepodge. That
Yeah.
case ended up being 2 semesters worth.
Sure.
But again, multiple opportunities to go in front of a judge, oral argument on motions. I actually had opposing counsel on the other side, which is a very interesting experience because sometimes you'll get attorneys who recognize that you're law students and treat you like lawyers. And then there's some that will take advantage of the
Yeah.
fact that you're a law student. So a good learning experience for how to determine who your opponent is, or who opposing counsel is, and how to deal with them, and whether or not they're going to be someone you can trust to extend on a motion or work with honestly. And again, you always want to give everyone the benefit of a doubt, but a valuable learning experience in the clinic. 'Cause sometimes opposing counsel is not your friend.
Right. So you finished up law school, passed the bar. I won't even ask you about the bar exam experience.
It was not that bad.
Good.
You just, again, same thing, treat it like a job, study, find some time for yourself. If you have twins, obviously, it's a little bit tougher, but
Take one of the bar prep classes,
Yeah.
and you treat it like a 9 to 5.
So then you're out in the world. Then you have to have a job and do something with your law degree. So talk to me a little bit about that journey. So some people leave, they know exactly what they're going to do. They figured it out over the 3 years of law school and they go right into it. Some people move around a little bit.
I came out without specific employment, which was not ideal. It was, again, still a relatively tough time. I had a couple clerkship options for family law that I, looking back, maybe shouldn't have turned down, but it was something that I knew I did not want to do in the long term. So I took different private jobs, did some criminal work in the city, and for some indictments up in Trenton, they had very large projects for politicians who were on the defensive, we'll say. And then fortunately, in the middle of the summer, my sister's best friend's father is an attorney. He needed help on an appeal. I came in and worked part-time. And then, as of now, he's our partner 6 years later. So it can be a very quick change, but as long as you're working hard and putting in your effort and time, it ends up working out more often than not.
Right. Absolutely.
I thought I wanted to do employment law, so I did what everybody does. I put my resume together and my cover letter, and my wife helped me make a spreadsheet of law firms, and I fired them all. I fired off hundreds of them, and I got like 2 calls back or something, You come to find out that most jobs are obtained through knowing somebody, or at least knowing somebody who knows somebody. But in any event, I also applied for clerkships, and I'm a Gloucester County guy, born and raised, and so I applied mainly in Gloucester and Camden County, and I ended up getting a clerkship. I actually initially got hired in the civil division, and then the judge called me back in and says, so I just got pulled up to go to the appellate division.
Nice.
I'm like, well, what's that entail? And he's like, well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about.
Right.
And he's like, they gave me some of these binders to look at so that I can start getting ready. And he's showing me these like big, huge binders with the green sheets and the pink sheets and whatnot. And he's like, you pretty much, you help me with the appeals and we write decisions all day. And I said, that's not really what I signed up for. Like, I thought I was going to be
very different.
I thought I was going to be in the trial division, moving and shaking. And he's like, well, think about it, because there's another judge that hasn't hired a clerk yet, so you could stay in the trial level. So I thought about it, and I met with the other judge, and she was in the chancery division. And I ended up switching to the chancery division. And then her current clerk at the time actually didn't have a job, so he went to the appellate division. So he did 2 clerkships, which was good for him.
Yeah.
So I clerked in the Chancery Division in Gloucester County for a year. It was a great transition between law school and the real world, I guess. I mean, it's still a real job.
Right.
You have to show up every day, and there's real work to do. But it's a really, really good learning experience. You get to see how the court works, the behind the scenes of how the courts work and how judges think. You get to see, how different lawyers operate, the different types of submissions you get, different types of oral argument style. The other thing that I really enjoyed was we had to mediate special civil part cases as law clerks. In Gloucester County, it's mandatory. Even the family part people are supposed to come over on Thursdays and be ready to mediate cases. And then they would, depending on how many cases there were, they would dole them out. But I probably mediated at least one case a week the whole time I was there. And that was another phenomenal experience because you just get really good experience in dealing with people, which you don't realize as an attorney. You just spend a lot of time just dealing with different personalities and with people. And then you figure out, ways to negotiate and help people resolve issues. After my clerkship, I always tell everybody that every law student that I meet or anybody really like to take advantage of like every networking opportunity. And so when I was here, they would do like lunch and learn or something. So I'll go down to this lunch and learn, and it happened to be with the local Gloucester County attorney. So afterwards, I just went up and introduced myself and just said, I'm Brian, I'm a Gloucester County guy. And he, at that time, said, I can't hire you, after your 1L year, but keep in touch with me. So I kept in touch with him, and I actually clerked there after my 2L year. So then after I got done my clerkship with the Superior Court, I still stayed in contact with him, and then I ended up getting hired at his firm. So I worked there for 2 years, doing workers' comp and Social Security. Then through another networking kind of deal, I was very involved with John and I were both very involved with the Gloucester County Bar Association. We're both young lawyer trustees. Through my contacts there, I got an opportunity to go and work at Archer Griner for a little over 2 years doing construction defense. And it was a great place to work, honestly. It really was. I just found out I'm not like a big law type of guy. Like I said, I went to the MBA program first. I'm more of like an entrepreneurial type person. I want to be more involved in the business aspect of the firm and practicing the type of law that I want to practice and taking the clients I want to take, that kind of thing. That's how I ended up to be partners with John and Tom. And that was about 1.5 years ago. We formed our partnership.
And again, it was all through networking, the Bar Association, attorneys who'd been around longer who saw us as potential people to come up and be future leaders in the organization, talked us in very strongly to taking the positions. And then that's how we met. And over time, along with other trustees, just you build up a rapport. And I think, as Brian said, if there are events here, whether it's with potential employers, potential partners in the future, people you might see across the aisle, go to them, meet people, learn how to shake hands, look someone in the eye, and if not make an impression, at least leave a good enough impression that they would talk positively of you if anyone asked about you.
Mm-hmm. I can track literally every part of my legal career back to that free hoagie. Seriously, because that's how I got my job, and then being involved in the Bar Association is how I met John. So through all those little networking events and meeting people and just being out there and being active, it creates opportunities.
Yeah. We get a lot of first-gen students. We get folks who are first in their family to graduate from college, first in their family graduate from law school. And I think one of the things that people often struggle with is, I don't have an existing network, and so I'm never going to be able to sort of make things happen. So I like the story, which is you create it, right? And we can build a lot of those opportunities as an institution, but students have to take advantage of it.
Yeah, my mom was a school teacher and my dad's a fireman. Like, I don't really even know any attorneys. Mm-hmm. In my family, I don't know.
My dad's a steam fitter, mom's a nurse, and I was the first one to graduate from law school from the family. And it's really just about building up your own network of people. And we come back and I think we did some interviews, mock interviews for nighttime students and other things. So if attorneys are willing to come back to the school, take advantage of it, the mentor program, everything else, because that could be a potential employer one day or a reference. And it goes a long way when another attorney says that's a good person, you can trust them, they'd be good to work for.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the stories that I think the first person who we did a podcast with, one of her first either summer jobs or jobs out of law school was somebody who was an adjunct here. right? And he was a practicing attorney, and she struck up a relationship with that person, and then she got a job. Because so much of it is really just meeting people, making a good impression on people, right? Because people remember that good impression, but they will definitely remember the bad impression too.
They will.
Right?
Yes.
So making that good impression and then sort of taking it where it goes. So let's talk about the type of law that you guys are doing now. So, one of the things that I love to talk to people about is, they come into law school and they have this vision of what a lawyer does and what kind of law they're going to do. And then so often, 5-10 years out, they're doing something completely different from what they were imagining. So talk to me about that a little bit. What kind of work do you guys do and how did you get into it?
So my second favorite classes were my antitrust classes with Professor Carrier, which is partially why I came to law school. That's kind of what I thought it would be. Large class action cases, that's what I expected to do. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
But I always knew that I wanted to try the civil side, business law, and I did a lot of the family and kind of criminal law during law school to make sure I was positive about it. It turns out I was right as to what I was meant for. And now we call ourselves a civil litigation firm because we'll do basically everything that isn't family or criminal. A lot of trust and estate work, both litigation and estate planning. We'll do commercial litigation, contract disputes. We form corporations, help out directors and boards when they have issues on their board, and also do some employment work. And then Brian has a couple areas that he does in addition to those.
Yeah, my first job after my clerkship, I did almost exclusively workers' comp and Social Security on the plaintiff or petitioner side. So I still do that as part of my practice now. That's kind of something that we're trying to develop at our firm. And then, essentially a litigator doing construction defense before now. So I don't really do construction defense, but if you can litigate a civil case, you can litigate any kind of civil case generally. I think we're really trying to develop like our estate litigation practice because I clerked in the Chancery Division, so that just kind of makes sense, and John really enjoys it. And then Tom does a lot of transactional real estate. So we're trying to stay, like John said, try and stay in that kind of civil side of things. And it's good to have a niche to an extent. As a firm, I guess our niche is that we're a civil-sided firm. And I think that the general practice firm of probably 20 years ago is really going away. I mean, most people have maybe 2 or 3 areas of the law that they really practice these days. Within our firm, have one person do most of the transactional stuff, one person do most of the estate litigation, and then one person does Social Security and workers' comp. But, we're still a small firm, but we're growing. So, hopefully one day we'll be not necessarily adding practice areas, but adding, staff. So.
Right. So every once in a while, we have somebody who graduates from law school and they just go out and they hang out a shingle and they just start practicing law, which I just think is the most extraordinary thing for someone to do. But even, you guys haven't been out that long and you have your own practice, right? And so one of the things that I think folks don't recognize is that law is a business. That it's not just that you're out there practicing, that you actually are a business person. You have to manage people. You have to, know what's going on with your books. You have to create business, all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to hear you sort of talk a little bit about first of all, how do you get comfortable with that? Because I think a lot of people wouldn't be comfortable with that. Did you feel like you were prepared for it? And if not, what do you wish you had done before you became your own law firm?
I'll leave that first to the gentleman with the MBA.
I mean, like I said earlier, I kind of always wanted to be a business owner. So then when you become a lawyer, the natural next step is to try to own a law firm. So I do enjoy the business aspect of it, but even though I have an MBA from the great Rutgers School of Business here in Camden, you're not necessarily prepared for every little thing that you come up against. But I think the biggest thing that you don't realize is that it does take a lot of time and effort to manage employees. So, hiring people it takes a lot of time and effort in finding the right team members. And then just all of the other little things that go into, if you have issues with your phones or issues with your computer or...
There's a lot that we can list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is, when you're an employee, you're working, you get your automatic check every 2 weeks or every week, whatever it is. And then when you're behind the scenes, making sure that there's money in the checking account to make payroll.
Right. It's like the difference between renting an apartment and owning your own house. Yeah.
Yes. The difference is, if you miss a mortgage payment, it's not great. But, if you don't pay your employees, you're in real trouble.
Absolutely.
They won't be employees for very long. So fortunately, we've been able to build and grow. But in terms of the time, it's like being a full-time attorney. And then on top of that, running the business. So it takes a lot of time. It is, even with a degree, it's a learning experience, just like everything else. Fortunately, we have someone who's done it for a number of years, who's been there to help us. Overall, it's been a good experience, and one where you have to kind of take that risk sometimes. Both Brian and I had he went out on his own. He didn't mention briefly after he left Archer and Griner to start his own firm. And as soon as I saw that, I knew he would be a good person to work with because of working with him in other organizations, and he had a good reputation. But the business side of it is one where if you're at those networking events and you're meeting people, think of that as you're trying to meet clients. Because even if right then you might not be a partner, it might not be that type of law, 3 or 4 years down the line, they may see your name and give you a call or remember you. And then in terms of when you just go out and start your own law firm right at a school, I know some classmates who did it. I give them all the accolades in the world because it's a frightening thing to have to be on your own and do. But a lot of the people who are most successful in the long run, they take those risks. You have to grind it out for a number of years. But in the long run, that hard work and effort pays off because you build up your client base early, you build a good reputation, and you get more experience. Not to say the big firms don't give young associates no work, but how often are they doing a deposition? How often are they really arguing a motion of substance? And maybe you can talk to that a bit, where I know a lot of them do the pro bono work so that they actually get courtroom experience, because if it's a multi-million-dollar or larger case, they're going to want a senior associate, a partner working on it, and not a first or second year. So I think people who come right out, people who start with smaller firms, they get a lot more experience a lot quicker, and there's a much greater learning curve, I would say, both for the law side and the business side.
For me, I had started out at a smaller firm, so it was like I was making court appearances in workers' comp court within the first month.
Yeah.
I was handling Social Security hearings within the first month. So yeah, your experience and your learning curve is a lot steeper. That kind of carries over now that we're it's just me and John and Tom, so we don't have associates to have do work for us necessarily, or to make appearances for us. So yeah, we're doing it all, which is good. And obviously, it's a long game. I think a lot of people might go to law school thinking, well, I'm going to get a job in Philadelphia or New York or D.C., and I'm just going to make boatloads of money right off the bat, and I'll be set. I'll be it. Well, it's not everybody, and not that everybody wants that,
right.
But you got to be willing to take a risk, like John said, and put in the work, find the right opportunity. I think it was good, and it was a good fit for us. We work well together. We're enjoying ourselves.
Excellent. So I know we're going to start bumping up against time, so I have 2 more things that I want to ask about. So the first thing is, it's going to go back a little bit to something that we were talking about before, and I can't remember which one of you said it, but law and being a lawyer is very much a people business, not just in terms of networking, but also working with clients. That you're giving people advice, you're giving people counseling. Sometimes people are coming to you when they are in a really bad set of circumstances, and that professional relationship also sort of requires you to be able to handle those kinds of emotions and difficulties and things like that. Can you talk about that a little bit, sort of that aspect of the job? I mean, one of the things I think a clinic is good for is it starts to get you thinking about that aspect of being a lawyer.
So I know one of my early clinic experiences was not recognizing my actual client when I came downstairs because of her name, and that was a very big waking experience where I should not think about anyone until I've met them. And I remember I brought that up with the clinic, and it came up with other people. So it's just recognizing that it's someone's life that you're dealing with, whether it's money, criminal, family. It is their life, and it means more to them. And you have to be compassionate about it. You have to be able to listen. And it's going to be some long phone conversations often. There is some, we'll call it client control, where you have to manage their expectations. Everyone will say it's the principle of the matter. We're going to take them to the Supreme Court, and then they get your first invoice.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's, well, what are some in-between games? Or, I'm going to go to trial. I didn't do it. And again, whether you did or didn't, here's the reality of the situation. And we've unfortunately, while we don't do criminal, we often get appointed pro bono counsel for a number of different cases. And you have to be real with people about, here are your options. And they're very difficult conversations.
Yeah.
You also have to always trust your client, but remember your obligations as an attorney and your ethical obligations, particularly with regard to putting someone on the stand during a deposition. If they have documents or information that you know about, and they say, well, I don't want to give that, well, you have to. You told me about it. I know it exists. Here's my cover letter saying, you told me about this. Make sure it's around. And I think that's a difficult part that maybe people don't recognize right off the bat, because you're not dealing directly with clients all the time. Maybe you're in a back room or just reviewing discovery, and it could be, the smallest client or the biggest client. You have to treat them all the same with compassion and be realistic with them always. If you set really high goals, we're going to shoot for the moon early on, and you don't get close, they will remind you, and they won't come back.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with injured clients, so either injured workers or personal injury clients, they have a lot at stake there, and you do have to be willing to put a lot of time and effort and energy into showing them that you care and that you have their best interests at heart. And like John said, that turns into, you got to take a lot of phone calls and make sure you're calling people back and communicating with people. You can't sit on the phone for hours on end every day listening to people, but you got to let people talk, and a lot of times people just want to vent to you as their attorney, and you have to say, I understand what you're saying and I'm pissed too, but here's where we're at and these are our options. You have to realize and I didn't realize this going into law school and then becoming an attorney, almost every client that comes to you has a problem that you need to solve or help them solve. So you're taking on, you have all your own issues and problems that you're dealing with in your personal life or whatever, just regular life. And then you go to work and you're solving other people's problems all day, every day. So you have to remember, you have to realize that. That's part of the gig is solving problems and trying to get paid to do it.
Right. Right.
So.
And try not to carry too much of other people's stuff home with you at the end of the day.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so last question, which is, we're getting ready to welcome our new class on Monday. I have orientation on Monday, and I always get to give a little speech. If you were in the position where you had to welcome our new 1Ls to the law school, what's one piece of advice you would want to make sure to offer up to them?
We'll say treat law school like it's a job and like it's going to be your career for the next 30 to 50 years. Take it seriously and treat every event like it's your job. Every networking event, every time meeting with a professor, every externship, internship, not a pro bono thing you do, all the activities. Treat it all like it's a job, and if you don't do it well, you're either not going to be an attorney in the long run or you're not going to be a successful attorney.
To go back to, I guess I really have to go back to the clinic and just say, keep the clinic in mind at the end of your third year. That's where you're going to get the most real world experience, and you're going to get the best taste for what it's like to be a real practicing attorney. Do something here while you're at Rutgers that's like more of a real world experience, whether it's volunteering for some type of pro bono program, domestic violence, doing a clinic, but try to get out there, do an externship, do something that's going to mimic what it's like to be a real life attorney, so that you can actually get that real experience. But other than that, I would just echo what John said. You got to take it serious and put the work in and really look at every opportunity as a networking opportunity, and keep in touch with all your classmates too. You're going to make lifelong friends.
I would just follow up on that a lot of the people that I did pro bono work with, organizations with, they now either have their own law firm or close to being partners, or even if they're just associates, they get credit when clients get referred to them. And you want to keep good relationships, and you want to have a good reputation, not just after law school, but in law school as a hard worker and someone who takes it seriously, because that type of reputation will build up over time after you graduate.
Excellent. That's one of the first things that I say to them. Right? Today is the day that your professional career has begun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for taking time to come and talk to us today. It's always nice to have people back in the building. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
It's good to be back. Thank you.
The Power of Attorney is produced by Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations, minutes from Philadelphia and New York City, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more by visiting law.rutgers.edu.